Mute there. Welcome everyone. This is kind of new for me, so have a little patience. But I run the cybersecurity and infrastructure practice at KIS. KIS has been around since 1988. We're a multidisciplinary consulting and IT services firm. We have quite a few core technologies and services that we provide, from virtualization to cloud to consulting, sales and support. We do some managed services across the board for all that, and of course infrastructure and cybersecurity, which is my focus areas. Welcome. Fortinet here is one of our partners for both infrastructure and cybersecurity. They have a great offering. We've worked with them for a number of years, and I'm interested to see just how they've been improving and morphing their product to fit the ongoing changes in the industry, as well as some of their new offerings that are coming up. So, Darius?
Right on. Hey, folks, welcome to this Fireside chat. On behalf of Fortinet and KIS, I thank all of you. I know your time is really, really precious, so we're going to be delivering a valuable message for you, I hope. I'm Senior Director of Marketing here at Fortinet. I've been in the cybersecurity industry now for 10 or more years, and the infrastructure industry for, well, in my entire career. So I've got a thing or two going on, in terms of the knowledge of it. But I've also been an SE, so I've lived the life of a sales engineer, and just dealing with customer issues straight up. So, right on.
Right.
So
let's kick off with the trivia game. Yes.
Go ahead. Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Sure.
Let's just start our. What is by far the most prevalent malware affected business today? And then punch in your results in a window that will pop up in a few. And let me just back up a little bit while you're thinking over this question. So everybody, thank you for joining, and everybody's today will receive $15 gift card from Grubhub. Please do stay until the end. You do need to stay until the end to receive it. And for trivia game, we will have one winner per question. No repeats, please, so we can have everybody have a chance to play and win a Fortinet goodie bag with all the kind of fun swag. So let's go ahead and launch the first question. So is it my doom, spyware, adware, or ransomware? And you have 10 seconds to answer. You have 5 more minutes. And good to go. So the rest is ransomware. So it's D, good job. Let's share the results. And majority of you guys got it. Good, thank you. The next one will be, let's see, what is the most exploited threat vector exploited by attackers today? Let's launch the question. Just a second to launch. Is it a we have a few more minutes. 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And of course, that's email. Correct. All righty. Thank you.
All right. Some people are right on the buttons right there.
Yeah,
yes,
great responses.
Yes. Good job. 87% answered that correctly.
Awesome. All right. Craig, are you going to tell us a little bit about KIS to get started? Tell us a little bit about
Sure.
what you do and so on.
Right. So as I said earlier, KIS is a multidisciplinary firm. So we, like I said, we have a lot of different groups that focus primarily on their cores. Like I said, there's virtualization, cloud. My expertise and what we're here today to discuss, obviously, is the cybersecurity aspect of that and how Fortinet will, give us a hand with that and with their offerings. So what we do in the cybersecurity and infrastructure practice is just that we work on layer 1 through 4 for the infrastructure, building out the north, south, east, west environments, attempting the best we can to guide and consult with the clients to make sure they're putting in all the right controls and services to protect them, utilizing either services or configuration hardening and things like that. Also selecting the products that will best fit for their organization. On that more cybersecurity focused area, what we do is we do everything from program assessments, find out where you are from the standards that are out today, and as they develop and change, we adjust ourselves for those. So, there's NIST, there's CMMC, there's 853 from NIST, obviously. There's the CIS top 20s, which actually is like a top 18 now. And because they, again, keep changing along with the industry. ISO, I do a lot of ISO assessments to get them ready for their certification. And the list goes on in that regard. We also do product and service, implementation, planning, implementation, and selection. So that when we go into an environment, we can understand what it is that they have, what it is that they need, what will best fit their particular business, and then work with them to make sure the implementation goes in correctly and is properly managed, monitored, and such. Lastly, I do a lot of incident response, unfortunately. Incident response has been one of the things that we didn't really want to get into, but we're kind of forced into because the knowledge just wasn't there. Cyber insurance hadn't really stood itself up to be able to respond correctly, but since we started, they have come a long way. So if you've got cyber insurance, you can pretty much bet that you're going to be taken care of. Between us with our boots on the ground approach and working with the cyber insurance teams, that includes lawyers, forensic groups, the insurance company themselves and things like that, we can bring to the client a fully capable recovery and response and recovery procedures and processes. We also provide after the event, we provide, most of the time we'll provide a post-mortem if the client needs one, if it's pretty extensive, and we'll make sure that they have a path forward to improve themselves so the attack won't happen again. That's why we do a lot of the assessments and pen testing, is because we try to get to the client before any of this happens. So that's our practice, summarized. And the infrastructure side, we work with, again, a lot of the infrastructure teams like Fortinet, works in that space, as well as Cisco and Dell, and the list goes on.
Right on. It's a good list. So that's a good portfolio of services as well. That's really critical. Some of those parts in there, absolutely critical. Actually, all of them are critical. Hope you never have to use any of those things, but just is what it is in terms of recovering from an attack, right?
Right.
So let's fire up this conversation. We're here to talk about security automation, which is absolutely critical. It's not really a mainline conversation, but it really is absolutely crucial. Okay, so I mean, the trivia questions there are important questions, and they kind of frame up a lot of the conversation that we're going to have over here. We're going to spend a bit of time talking about ransomware, because it is the most prevalent form of attack right now. And it's affecting 60% or more of actually small to medium-sized businesses. It's just because there's just simply soft targets, right? The enterprises out there are much hardened. They have more people, they have more resources, they have more equipment, they have more of everything that they can throw at this topic, but the SMB does not. So, and attackers like going for the soft tissues that we have, and the SMBs typically have a lot of them, but it doesn't need to be the case. So, Craig, why don't you start off the conversation? Let me throw a question at you. What are you seeing out there right now?
Right, that's a good question. We see a lot of over the years that we've been doing this. I've been doing this since probably 2002, 2003, the changes in the attack vectors, the models, the reasons people go after entities have changed and morphed and adjusted as the defensive mechanisms around them adjust and change. They, like you said, they've got 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to work on this. You as a small business have 0 in most cases. So you're trying to rely on what you can put in, what you can use as best you can, and they just have a better hand up on that. Ransomware has morphed into data exploitation. And then after the exploitation, the last thing they do is go ahead and ransomware you. So they'll do exploitation or exfiltration. They'll use that to exploit your data on the dark web or deep web, and then they'll run and do ransomware at the end of it. There may be something in the middle of that, like a banking attack or something like that, to try to get into your banking records. You'll see a lot of that these days. Before they actually ransomware. If you see ransomware, it's probably the end of the attack, not the beginning. So that's kind of how they've morphed in the last couple of years. And that's what I'm seeing a lot of. The attack vectors haven't necessarily changed. They're basically the same as they have been. It's just that they've improved on how they make it happen. Sometimes it's a longer game on the reconnaissance because it's more difficult to get in on the front end. But believe me, it's pretty much the same types of attacks that get them in.
Yeah, some really key points there. I mean, they don't really change, like you say, the vectors. They're using those vectors, and a vector is defined as the path along which an attack occurs.
Exactly.
So the email is a threat vector. The websites is a threat vector. Your phone is SMS is a threat vector. You've probably heard of vishing now, which is voice phishing.
Right.
And so on. So all of these, these threat vectors are well understood by the attackers, but some are better exploited than others, right? Email is by far and away the most common threat vector employed because they're actually relying on the lack of a human firewall at the other end and probably some very rudimentary email security in place over there to actually take advantage of an attack, right? Everybody, all humans, right? So 90% of attacks come through as a result of human error, quite honestly, right?
Yes,
and that is largely because there are some really tantalizing things to click on there, right? And I can tell you that 90% or more, or almost 100% of people who are advertising anything with pictures of puppies on there and so on has got malicious intent, right? Absolutely guaranteed. But look, seriously, here's the point, right? We started this conversation talking about ransomware, and it's a really good conversation because of the sophistication behind a ransomware attack. All right, most of the other attacks that that exist out there today, they're kind of covered by a lot of the discussion that we're going to be talking about today in terms of how we detect them, how we remediate them, and how we respond and go about fixing them. But ransomware is a good use case because it's something that's most likely going to come or strike close to home, whether it means that it's going to hit you or it's going to hit one of your customers, one of your partners, or your other companies, people that it's going to happen somewhere or other. The point is over here, as we bring it round to talk about the topic headline, is that ransomware happens at the speed of light. Craig, you said it right there. If you see a ransomware attack, you're probably seeing the back end of a ransomware attack, and that's not a good place to be, right? So security automation has a very important role to play in this. Look, a lot of customers we see, they fall in. They all have different levels of security awareness. They all have some of them have a good understanding of security, others not so much. Look, you want to, as a small business or a medium-sized business, you want to focus on your business, exactly that, and not the security side of it. But the side effect of this is that a lot of companies start to hear that they need to do something about security, and their first foray into security is as a result of a quick fix, right? So somebody's told them, or they've heard that the most logical thing to do is get a firewall. So they put a firewall in place and they go do that. And that's great. They go do that, and it seems like everything's functioning just great. Well, not all firewalls are created equally. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But that leads on to the second phase of a typical scenario, and that's some kind of break-in or some kind of an attack, such as ransomware, right? The next phase of an attack, really, the attacker's kind of done his bit at this point in time, but confusion sets in at the customer, right? Confusion as to the very typical what happened, why did it happen, and all of these questions are all way too late, right? They don't affect anything. And at that point in time, honestly, we get a few phone calls ourselves as the vendor of the equipment that they put in place. Perhaps they call up to say, well, we put you in place, but you know what happened? This attack still came through, right? And we need to talk about that a little bit more, because it doesn't necessarily mean that the vendor's bad. In fact, that quite often it doesn't mean that the vendor's bad. Quite often it means that there's a misconfiguration, or that the attack came across on another threat vector. All right, so complete security is very important. That's what we're talking about today over here. Then the next phase of this is that, you know, the company typically is very anxious, and you can understand it's very anxious to get back up on their feet and get business running again, because money is just kind of bleeding out through the problem over here. And they immediately go to a restore type situation without going on and kind of skipping the analysis and remediation type situation. And it's very important that you go about this methodically. Craig touched on that, and some of the services that KIS offers over here is to go through that. And I know you want to skip past it. It seems very logical, but what happens then, which is step 5 of this, is when you do a restore, that ransomware has been also restored, which is something that you kind of backed and archived or whatever it is, and before you know it, again, you've got another problem, right? So it's very, very, very important that you avoid all of these pitfalls, all right? So now on top of that, okay, as a small business, one of the things that we have to be very cognizant of is some of the things that I've mentioned, some of the things that Craig has mentioned over here, are that, you know what, we don't have a ton of resources. That's how small businesses are. We don't have resources, or even more to the point, specialized resources, people that sit around and work on security all day, or even infrastructure all day, right? And so we understand that. As Fortinet, we totally understand that. And so the idea here is to help you through our partners and through our technology, is to help you get back up on your feet, or even not have to get back up on your feet, but provide you with a set of solutions that don't require much in the way of interaction from you, or not really, you know, too much in the way of understanding of cybersecurity. We pass on that knowledge to you through training, and we pass on that knowledge to our partners, and our partners have got a good deal of that knowledge, so that you don't have to deal with that. All right. So it doesn't have to be complicated. We're going to talk about a few things here today, but we're not going to rip the band-aid off and just say, you know what, you need to be experts. That's not what this is about. That makes sense, Craig?
Absolutely. I mean, you touched on some really good points there. You know, like I was telling you before, I mean, there's the fact that you don't have the people means you must do something. The only thing you have left to you is automation or outsourcing. If you don't have the people, there's outsourcing usually isn't really something you can afford either, because that analyst is going to cost a pretty good amount of money, or that group. So you have to look at it from where can you put the best bang for the buck on this and actually get the results. So that's where automation comes in. On every standard I talk to my clients about, automation is key. Put it wherever you can, right? It's important to do that, because again, they have all the time in the world to attack you, and they will. It's not a matter if, it's a matter of when. And how successful they are is going to depend on what you've got in place and what you can see to prevent it. And visibility is key. And I know on the automation side of the house, that's one of their driving points, is always going to be visibility of the client into the problems, anomalies, basically. When I was working against Anonymous and our evil and the Index Spider group in a couple of incidents, had just a couple of controls been put in place where the alert would have went out, those attacks wouldn't have been successful. The other thing is zero-day exploits. No vendor can protect against a zero-day unless they have just the right tool in the right place. Again, anomaly detection, not attack detection. And that way it could be investigated, checked, and verified that it either is or isn't something that's going to harm you. And then you can put a policy against it to either alert you or not in the future. So that automation is very important.
Yeah.
And I can't stress that enough, especially in the smaller groups out there.
That's really good points, right? So let's break that down a little bit. You said a couple of really key words there, right? The automation side of it, as well as the visibility side of it. Look, the way that small businesses grow typically, as we see, is that on this side of things, they're a little bit more reactive, right? Some of the technology that they acquire is either by word of mouth, friends, other CEOs, and so on, or by going through the websites and getting recommendations from a number of different resellers, vendors, and so on. But either way, however you get there, the net result is that on average, these small to medium-sized businesses in North America end up having 16 different vendors or different types of products in their security stack. And they're all disparate products. They're all probably from different vendors, some of them from the same vendor, some from different vendors. Now let's start taking that conversation over to automation. All right. So if you put yourself in the shoes of one of those customers, maybe you are one of those customers, and an attack does happen. All right. One of those devices, or several of those devices, I would hope, depending on the type of attack, are going to suddenly start screaming at you. All right. Now, at this point in time, let's be real. Okay, it's too late. All right. But in the off chance that you can actually do something, and these things are screaming at you, and you knew what you were going to do, one of those things, which one of those consoles, which one of those 16 consoles are you going to go to? And when you go to it, what are you going to go and do? Right? Very, very, very key and important points, because it's telling you something. This console is telling you that something is wrong, but you've got to correlate that information across the other 16 devices in your infrastructure and try and make sense of it. Like I said, at this point in time, it really is too late, because if you have to manually intervene with anything, such as an attack, or like ransomware, which does spread at the speed of light and spreads across your infrastructure, through your security devices across your infrastructure, then again, like I said, it's too late. So let's now take the conversation about what we need to do about this. Well, the first problem is potentially that you've got 16 different devices that don't talk to each other. This is a question of integration, all right? Integration is that correlation, right? Is the first step to automation. It's the ability for those different devices from different vendors to actually communicate with each other and to spit out something somewhere that is useful that you can do. Or even better, it actually does it for you, all right? Now, for it to be able to get there and to be able to do that, not only does it need to be integrated, but it has to have very, very, very broad visibility as well, okay? What I mean by broad visibility is that it's actually taking information from these other vendors' devices, or these other devices that you've actually acquired over time, and it can see what they are seeing and actually make some intelligent decisions about it. All right. And so all of that then leads to the third characteristic of what you want out of a system over here, is that based on those two things, if you have integration and you have great visibility, now we can start to talk about automation. All right. Now we can start to correlate our visibility and our detection and start to take actions in real time. So
and this is actually a good breaking point, and to jump in back to the trivia questions. So let's do this. Let me just share my screen. All righty. Name one of three characteristics of the Fortinet fabric. And you have.
We actually just covered three characteristics right there.
Yes.
Great timing.
I have 10 seconds. All right, 3, 2, and 1.
All right.
Yes.
You guys rocked it. You guys rocked it.
Yes, we have, of course, I said it's automated. And as you can
Integrated
see,
and automated.
yes, integrated and automated, which is awesome. Also, broad is acceptable as well. But they're very interesting that 83% gathered from your conversation just right now, integrated.
There we go. Awesome. Well done, guys.
Yes.
Good job.
And let's have one more. All right, what percentage of attacks are directed at SME, small to medium-sized businesses? And we have 60, 99, 10, or 40. And we have 10 seconds. All righty. And we have, oops, 60, not 99, but 60%.
Gotta leave some love for some of the other
Right.
size
Yes,
businesses
yes.
as well.
Right.
Yeah, it is
Yes.
indeed about 60%. Like I said, that's because of the soft tissues that and the lack of resources that the SMBs typically exhibit. So with that, let's talk about the solution over here. Let's talk about what Fortinet actually does to actually get these three characteristics aligned. What Fortinet has done over here is that in the last 20 years, when our founder, Ken Z, actually founded the company, he had this vision of integrating, creating a set of security products that were very highly integrated, had broad visibility, and could do that automation as well. And that's exactly what's happened. He's built the company up to achieve exactly that. Now, it's not just across security products as well. We actually do it through infrastructure products as well. And I'm going to do is I'm going to build you up an example. All right. The best place to start with this is a firewall, our FortiGate product. All right. The FortiGate in of itself is an enterprise grade firewall, and it has all the features and functions that you would expect from what they used to call a UTM, Unified Threat Management. The UTM basically means that it will actually protect several threat vectors. The internet, it does SSL encryption and decryption. It looks at websites and manages websites for malicious content and traffic, and a ton of other things. But we don't need to get too deep into what the firewall does. Essentially, what it's doing is providing a hardened shell around your infrastructure to make sure that the bad people can't get in. Now, interestingly, like we said, email is the most exploited threat vector because people have, these attackers actually have a real hard time getting through firewalls, but they can do it through email the other way around. We'll talk about that more in a second over here. Now, the firewall is a really important place to begin because it's where we define security policy, all right? Security policy are those things that you determine as a user or as an IT manager or security manager as to what is acceptable and what is not acceptable to be happening that comes into and leaves my infrastructure. And it's not just blocking, it's also prioritizing things. So you want certain behaviors to actually be accelerated, right? So applications such as Zoom, you want to make sure that you have good quality video, and a good firewall such as FortiGate will actually make sure that it does that at the detriment of other applications that don't require that performance, such as email, all right? So policy, again, like you said, it's where the heart and soul of your security is. And really what's important over here is that you actually get to the point in your infrastructure and your security where you're defining policy in one place and once. The reason why I say this is because if you want uniform policy, you have now got to, in the old model, go and define that over 16 different products or solutions, all right? And that's a problem. How do you correlate all of that, and how do you maintain consistent policy? All right, so we define it once in the firewall, and now let's build out the rest of a typical office infrastructure. We have Ethernet switches and we have access points. What's unique here that we do at Fortinet is that our FortiSwitch, when you plug it into the firewall, some magic happens, it becomes the firewall. And that's very unusual, right? What I mean by that is all the ports of the Ethernet switch actually communicate back and forth with the firewall to make sure that all the traffic that is coming and going from them is actually clean. Take that a step further, when you plug in a FortiAP or an access point into the FortiGate or to the firewall directly, it becomes the firewall as well. So what this means is that you've got you've got integration between the firewall, the access points, and the switches, but you also have management of all of those devices through a single pane of glass, which gives you great visibility, as we've said. And now we can start to lay on automation. Let me give you an example, right? You bring in a customer from outside, right? He comes into your conference room, he plugs into your Ethernet port, or connects to an access point, whatever. But because you know nothing, you don't govern his security whatsoever, he has a virus on there of some sort, some kind of malware on there. Now, what happens is that all the infrastructure that I spoke to you about is actually connected up to our threat protection system or threat intelligence system, our sandboxing and threat intelligence system. That threat intelligence system sees 15 billion events an hour, right? That's what we see, right? And that's because we have such a huge broad base of customers all over the world, and we're connected into all sorts of other neural networks as well that provide us with all these threat feeds and landscape feeds that make sure that nothing bad gets through, all right? So let's go back to our example again. This guy's connected to your access point, and then he tries to start transmitting data. And of course, the type of ransom or malware that he's got on there then starts to try and propagate itself onto the infrastructure, because that's what it does. That's what it's designed to do. The access point sees this traffic and it determines that that traffic is instantly malicious, right? And so the automation begins. It communicates up through to the firewall to actually make that determination that the traffic is, or the data is in fact malicious. The firewall says and then sends down information back to that firewall, to the access point or to the switch to say stop. All right. Now, what we're getting into at this point in time is what we call playbooks. All right. How do we want to deal with this? What do we want to do when we see something like this? Because what you do now at this point in time is really important. Again, we're going to do this without user intervention. All right. Hopefully what happens, and you set up your playbooks correctly, is it will say, let's put this guy into quarantine. So we take him and we shove him into a completely different network where he cannot access any of your corporate devices or even the internet. He's basically just sitting there and he cannot do anything. And the first sign you're going to see of this is that the guy's going to say in the conference room, I'm sorry, I can't get on the network for some reason. I just can't seem to get anywhere. Meanwhile, back in the IT infrastructure offices or the security offices, all the alarm bells are going off. And you're getting a notice that's saying this guy in this room connecting to this access point has been trying to do this. However, his device is infected and we've actually quarantined him. We put him onto a different VLAN or whatever you decide that you want to do. And he's just sitting there and he can't do any damage whatsoever. Now, the good thing is based on your playbooks, you're not going to allow him to gain access, because the next thing he's going to do is try and plug into the Ethernet switch next to him, the Ethernet port in the conference room. And it's going to go, no, we know who you are. We know what you're trying to do. There's no access over here, right? And so IT guy should turn up at that point in time and say, oh, dude, there's no bueno. We need to get some malware off of your computer. All right. So that is a really, really nice scenario. That's contained inside your office, of course it is. And it's an interaction between our threat stack, which is up in the cloud, and the firewall, the access point, the switch, and then possibly even the computer itself. Let's say that was one of your employees. If you install FortiClient on that device, of course, FortiClient is going to say, you're going to carry on this conversation, right? It's going to have exactly the same thing. It's going to be communicating with the threat platform, and the threat platform is going to immediately say, this device has actually got an issue, and we're going to start remediation with inside that device, because that's what FortiClient does. It actually flushes out the malware and gets it out of there so that we can then get this guy back on, when we know that he's clean, back onto the infrastructure and going again. And it does it all automatically. And the nice thing about FortiClient is it doesn't matter where you are, right? You don't have to be sat in the office. You can be at home, doesn't matter, because threats happen at home as well. Attacks happen at home. Malware is there. And you now starting to see how these different threat vectors get plugged, okay, because they're all connected and they have visibility, they talk to each other. the firewall has sent down a command to put a blocking command on an Ethernet switch. That's integration, and then the automation over the top of it makes sure at real time that you've actually detected the threat and done something about it. That makes sense, Craig?
Absolutely. Whenever you can automate and provide that visibility across all endpoints, devices, and infrastructure, whether it be on-prem or external, simplifying that and providing that automatic, and also not only just the automated visibility and such, but the automated actions. I work it's very difficult to work in that area with third-party tools and non-integrated tools, because it's just, you're always trying to work with the RFCs and making sure everybody's communicating on the same everything. Having that in one place is extremely valuable. So in my mind, if I can have that at the port level on a switch, an extended firewall down to the port level on a firewall, without having to actually run a third-party integration of a third-party tool to make that happen, like I said, that's extremely important that I can do that, because again, I don't have to go to another vendor. I don't have to go to another piece of software. And in the integration portion of that, across from everything becomes a firewall, they're sharing all their information no matter where they are.
Right.
As long as the detection mechanisms that are configured in your playbooks are properly configured, you can pretty much wipe out a lot of the automated attacks that are out there. Now they have to get even smarter to try to beat the controls, and they're not going to. They're going to go on to somebody who's easier.
Right.
Why not? Because that's what they do.
Well, it's a numbers game at the end of the day, right? I was actually up in Minnesota. I was up in Minnesota recently. I don't know why, but I was up there, and I was doing a talk with some of our partners. I was actually talked to. I went to 2 different partners on the same day. Really amazing. And they said, yeah, we've got a customer who's just been ransomed. Or fished, I can't remember. It was one or the other. It was, and they said this number, which kind of resonated with me. They'd been asked for $46,000, right? And it was weird, because if somebody says that once, it's like, yeah, that's what they do. But then I went to the next partner along, and they said, yeah, we've got this customer, and they've just been ransomed for $46,000. I'm like, is it this customer? Is this the name of the customer? No, it's completely different. So it's very interesting. What this says is the sophistication of these attackers is such that they're actually doing campaigns. They have marketing departments or campaign departments that actually go around specific areas, identify specific types of company, and then go and hit them. And I guess it was unlucky for Minnesota that day or that week that they were part of that specific attacker's campaign, right? So this notion that you say that they move on to the next thing, their software doesn't give a damn. The malware doesn't give a damn. It just does that automatically. It either succeeds or it doesn't succeed. It doesn't get into a mood and go, oh, you know what, I'm going to try something else. Right?
Yeah, bots are still very popular.
Yeah,
bots are very popular. The campaign creators are getting very sophisticated. Deep and dark web, campaigns are getting more and more prevalent, with ransomware as a service becoming a known thing now. A lot of these older groups are actually renting out their attack platforms to bolt on to new initial attacks. And like I said, the vectors don't really change, but they get more sophisticated on how they get through them. So by having the visibility across the board at every endpoint with the good detection mechanism,
that's right.
Like I said, you can't beat it. You can't beat it.
That's right. That's right.
So
the picture is probably starting to come clear hopefully for people on the call right now. And what I showed you, or what I talked about, was just a small part of the Fortinet fabric. In actual fact, Fortinet has 40 different products in its portfolio, all designed to protect a specific threat vector. Now, at the beginning of this conversation, I did tell you that part of that typical scenario is that confusion sets in, and the customer starts calling vendors and resellers and says, why? I thought we bought this product and it was supposed to do the right thing and everything. But typically what happens there is that you've got to understand, you've got to take an approach to security that's very, very, very methodical, right? And there's room for human error in there in terms of misconfiguration, lack of understanding, and there's room for an attack to travel across a threat vector that perhaps you haven't protected. All right, this is where KIS can actually help you. They talked about, you know, that pre-study, that assessment, and that's really, really critical. Two things, all right? One is to make sure that your infrastructure is actually clean before you actually move on and do something about it, and the other one is part of that process is to make sure that you've plugged all the holes. It's like you don't go to work every day and just lock the front door and leave the windows open. All right. Attacks can happen across multiple different threat vectors, and that's where KIS can really help you. Now, with email, we said email, that was one of the trivia questions, is 90% of attacks are actually exploited across email. That's one that you absolutely have to secure as well. And that's always actually, based on the statistic, is a really, really good place to start. Actually, there never is, I mean, there is a good place to start, but you've got to be complete about it. Okay, you can't just leave the windows unlocked. Now, the email, we should talk about email just for a second here, Craig, because email is a multifaceted problem, from a human problem and a detection problem, right?
Right.
So let's talk about both of those. So in the Fortinet fabric, email is part of the Fortinet fabric, and it communicates with our threat stack above, which is up in the cloud. And it does an excellent job. It does a fantastic job on zero-day threats and attacks, just like it does on any of the other products, all right? The idea is nobody falls foul to anything. If we start to see something malicious coming through email, such as an attachment or a link, okay, there's multiple ways that you can actually, an email can be malicious. We actually analyze those. So links, we analyze those links, and we rewrite those links with secure links. So it's not just once, but it's for the lifetime of the email, right? So in other words, when you actually hover over the email link itself, it actually points back to a Fortinet server, which says that anytime you click that, what happens in the background is that we understand what the original link was, because that's embedded in there. We actually go out and we'll probe that site and understand whether that site or that content that it's pointing at is actually malicious. At any point in time, now or in 20 years' time, it's always going to happen. And if it's good, we'll send you the link, and you know nothing. You see nothing, right? You just end up going to the right place, which is fantastic. But if it's no good, you're going to message up on the screen saying, "Are you sure?" And that's your choice. Again, how you configure the fabric, or it's going to give you the option to, yes, you can go ahead and click on that link. Or it's going to say, no, absolutely don't do that. And I recommend that's the way that you do it, because that leads on to the second part of the problem, which is actually human error, the human firewall. Like I said, back to the whole puppies thing, and your account, and you've got to change your password. We think your account has been compromised, and all that kind of stuff. They're all very tempting for people who are not part of our conversation over here, that are a part of your general staff, to go click on. I love seeing those emails, right? And it's just amazing what these people are still trying, and the simplicity of what they're trying, the spelling mistakes, and dear friend, the email starts out, as opposed to dear Darius or whatever, all these things, right? This is part of the human firewall, and it is the most important, cost-effective thing that all of you can do today, is to make sure that you build that firewall. How do you do it? Through KIS and through Fortinet, right? We have end user training that goes through specifically these kind of actions. They'll give you worked examples, such as, this is an email, all right? Find all the different honeypots and foot traps and everything else inside these things that are going to turn your business into a disaster. Humans are still the first place and the most vulnerable out of all of them. Machines work the way machines work. It's binary, yes or no. Right? Humans have ambiguity, and that's bad. Craig, tell us a story.
Absolutely.
You've got to have a story there somewhere about email.
Oh yeah, email being obviously the most popular vector of attack. I've got tons. I get on my personal email and things like that. I get a lot of crazy stuff as well. I like seeing it, because I like to see where the attacks, what they look like these days, and whether or not there's any effort put into them. On the other hand, it's I see from clients that they fall for the vishing campaign. That's usually combined with a spear phishing campaign, where they've done their social engineering reconnaissance correctly. They've got all the right information. They've done all their preliminary work, and then they launch not only a phone call type thing, but they also back it up with the email.
That's right.
And the email may have the link embedded and stuff like that. And there's ways around that, which is why they've gone back to phishing. Phishing's old. It's been around forever. Ever since, there's been scammers on the planet with phones. They've been using, that type of an attack. So this is just a brush off refresh of that. And finding these campaigns is for small organizations next to impossible. So we have to find ways of trying to
preempt it.
We have to predetermine whether or not you have a campaign against you or not. And I don't know if anybody has recognized this, but these things usually come in waves. There's a reason for that, right? A particular group will set aside a particular vertical or industry or space that they're interested in, and they'll go at it. So it might be schools, it might be government, it might be manufacturing or whatever, and then it might even be in a specific area. And I know we've seen some stories on this as well, and I've actually seen them. This is why I bring it up, is that they'll do that and they'll come in at you on a campaign. And again, email. So if you have all the right things in email set up, like your SPF, your DMARCs, your DKIM and all that, then you can hopefully protect yourself correctly, but you still don't have standoff. And standoff, I don't know if anybody has recognized that, but it's standoff, it's keeping it as far away from your internal environment as possible. And that's one of the big things that you should be able to do, which is what Darius is talking about when he's talking about the links and having them secured in a secure cloud area where they can actually fire them off in a sandbox to verify that they're okay. That's the type of standoff that most organizations either haven't implemented, can't afford, or believe they can't afford, or they just don't believe that it's necessary because I hear a lot that we're not really an attack. We're not a target for these people. Well, if you can respond to an email, or if you can click on a link and they can ransomware you, you're a target. Because it's not, in a lot of cases, more and more it's becoming more not the case, but bots typically start all this, as we've said before. But more and more is becoming the case where it's a manual attack, especially if it's a targeted attack. So that's good. That's good information to know.
Yeah. So good points, really, really good points, and good insights there. Before we kind of wrap this up, because we're getting close now to the top of the hour, and we want to give some time for some questions. I want to talk very quickly about attacks that actually happen from inside. So I need to talk about Zero Trust, and I need to talk about something else called SASE, or the Secure Access Service Edge. Right? Zero Trust is a principle by which we trust nobody. It's essentially like saying anybody could come into my infrastructure. I don't care who the hell they are, but the moment they plug in over there, they're going to be subjected to a whole bunch of checks in terms of identity, hardware, you name it, and not just once, but on an ongoing basis. When I say checks, do they have rights? Do they have privileges? Should they be able to access, should Bobby in manufacturing be able to access finance servers and so on, all this kind of stuff. So Zero Trust network access is a very important next phase to make sure that attacks don't propagate from inside your infrastructure. I'm not going to spend too much more time talking about that, but another subset of this is something that we are all dealing with every single day, right? Is the remote worker. The remote worker is also a very important place that we actually have to place security on. And that starts with client security. Good EDR client security or good Forti client security, that is all part of the fabric, is utterly crucial. But there is another side to this, right? So when you have this worker, this remote worker, typically what they want to do is they want to access some kind of file, some server or something, some application somewhere. Now, in the typical case that or the world that we've lived in, that server actually resides inside your infrastructure in something called a data center. And so to be able to get to that safely, you require a VPN or a virtual private network. Everybody's worked with one of those. Everybody here has pulled up a VPN connection. Now, what I'm going to tell you about is SASE is a development that moves on from the VPN, right? Which means that you should never actually have to launch a VPN. And when you combine that with Zero Trust, it's a constant process of not authentication once, which was VPN, but constant authentication, regardless of where you are and what you're doing. In fact, all of this is now transparent because you have client software on your computer. Now, what this does is essentially the client will automatically build a tunnel to a SASE firewall, which is up in the cloud somewhere. All right, you don't have to worry about where it is. And it gives you great access to your cloud applications. In other words, you shouldn't have to be able to send traffic back to your data center and then hairpin it back out to the cloud. That's just a waste of time and a waste of resources and doesn't lead to good experiences. SASE takes care of that. It means that you don't have to fire up a VPN ever again, but the application steering that happens down at the client level will direct your traffic either up to cloud through a secure tunnel through a cloud-based firewall, or to your corporate headquarters in the case that you've actually got information there. Now, all of this, again, very important with the fabric, because when you're not sat behind a firewall, you need to have the same type of security that you would have if you were sat behind a firewall, right? And that is the premise of the Fortinet fabric. Look, I'm going to call it quits over there. There's a lot more that we could talk about, but I want to give you guys a chance. So you can come off mute and ask either myself or Craig any of the questions that you might have, and I will do my best to answer them through Craig.
Yes, or you can send it to the chat as well. If you don't,
right now.
Otherwise we can have a last trivia question. Yeah, let's just have a last trivia question, and then maybe there's some questions to you guys will come up.
Does this, so let me ask the audience a question. I'll challenge somebody to come off mute, okay? Does this make sense? Has what we've said here today been of value to you? Does it give you some idea of what you want to do next?
Yeah, good question.
Nick, can I challenge you? Nick Zanotto, can I challenge you? Because you've got a picture up on your Zoom. Can I challenge you to come off mute? Almost. There we go.
It is challenging to get the headset to work. Yes.
There you go.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, it does. Definitely a great presentation. I didn't know much about the company, so I mean, I've heard a lot about it just in passing. So I appreciate the time on this. Yeah.
Right on. Anybody else?
Great. Great.
All right, let's have a last trivia question. Name one of the well-known hacking groups that KIS has had to conduct incident response against too. And of course, and you have 10 seconds. We have LOLSEC, Lazarus, Reveal, or Indrik Spider Evil Corp. All right, got 10 seconds up. And the right correction, LOLSEC, but actually we have done all the rest as well and many more.
I was going to say, who put those answers out there? They're all true.
Yeah, they're all true.
Yeah, we've been in every one. We've been against every one of those.
Yeah, good deal.
And more.
Good deal. Good deal.
Thanks, everybody.
Yes.
If there's any other questions, feel free.
Yes.
Right on.
Yes,
I don't have a question, but I just want to thank you. I think it was a great presentation. It was a great format. But I wanted to just relate one thing, and it's really underrated, is the user awareness training. I actually had a CFO pull an email out of a junk file, out of his junk folder. So it had been correctly isolated. He took it out, addressed it. It was a man-in-the-middle attack, and they lost $495,000 by wiring it to the wrong account.
That's good.
So it just goes to show, user awareness training is so inexpensive, but all you need to do is get hit once.
Right.
It's actually the cheapest thing to implement as well, right?
I think so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Good story, Christian. A sad story, but a good story.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's like, just like incident response, wish you didn't have to do it.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Wish you weren't so busy.
Right on.
Yes.
Right on.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. All right. Again, thank you very much, everybody, for joining. Thank
Yeah.
you,
Thank you for your
Darius.
time.
Thank you, Craig, for taking your
Welcome. Thanks, everybody.
time. Yes. Otherwise, have a nice day.
Thanks, folks.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.